So today I share my harrowing story and my testimony and just a little backstory so people could understand why I made some of my choices. I was probably 12, 13 years old, and we were sitting in the car after church, and my mother went into the store to buy some treats for us because the girls were going to be at our home. And just so happens the story started because we were talking about, oh, when I grow up, I want to do this, that, and the other. And so it was my turn, and I told them when I grow up, I like to marry a good man, a Christian man, because I was raised in church. And I wanted to have my honeymoon in some tropical island. And I wanted 2 kids. And I wanted the boy first and the girl second. But I wanted them 5 years apart so that boy can look after his sister, you know. And so, you know, all those things happen. I did marry a man that went to church, knew his Bible, and he was in the U.S. Air Force. And I did have 2 children. I had my son first, and 5 years later, here came my daughter. So that was all granted. And even though they're 50 and 55 right now, my son is 55, my daughter is 50, he watched over her, and he protected her, and he made her feel safe, even though they were listening to the abuse that I was getting, the beatings, all that. So my dreams, childhood dreams came true, but wrapped in thunder. So actually the abuse started in a place called Alcalá de Henares, which is about 20 miles from Madrid, Spain. He was stationed at Torrejon Air Force Base in Madrid, Spain. And that's where it all started. But what I didn't know, I showed up, but what I did not know is when he was in Vietnam, he went straight from Vietnam to Torrejon Air Force Base in Spain, right out of the war zone there. What I didn't know was the backstory. I was wondering, the Air Force sent for my son and I. They shipped his car, but they didn't touch the furniture. And that was because of a deal that he made in Vietnam. He was caught smoking a marijuana cigarette in the barracks. I didn't even know that he had anything to do with drugs, okay? And he lost his stripe and his pay grade. But a lieutenant came to him and told him, if you work for me in Spain, then I'll have your stripe and your pay restored. So he agreed, okay? And so we went to Spain, and I was wondering, well, you know, how come we can't get our furniture? And he said, well, I'll look into it, and I'll look into it. And so they sent a C-5 to United States, to Columbus, Ohio, to pick up our furniture and bring it back. That's what was supposed to happen. Now, this furniture was brought when you re-enlist in a war zone, back then it was like $10,000 they give you. Okay, I spent $6,000 on furniture, 3 rooms of furniture. So it was gorgeous, right? And so, but the furniture never made it back. And so his excuse was, I gambled it up. I didn't know he gambled either. And I was stunned. And when I'm really shook up, I don't say anything. I process stuff first. And I said, I didn't know you gambled. Why would you do something like that? That's, you're going to have to buy some more furniture. I'm fine with that. But I wasn't. I just hid my anger. And I said to myself, the reason why I did that, I said to myself, for my own peace, people lose everything in disasters like tornadoes, the house burned down, this, that, and the other. So I'm going to treat it like that happened, and we'll just start all over again. Okay, but then as time passed and it was time to pay our rent there, he didn't have a paycheck, and I was trying to think. I forgave him. Okay, he didn't have a paycheck because he gambled it up. I said, no, this can't keep going. You got to stop. Well, that was very negative. And I was wondering why he was extra paranoid. I said, now he got caught smoking a cigarette. I wonder if he's doing anything else because he's acting really strange. Somebody knocks on the door, he panics. Well, the harrowing truth was, the deal was, if he went to work for this lieutenant in Spain, he would be a part of a military drug ring. Yes, the ones that put the drugs in the casket that was carried by the C5s, the fallen soldiers, drugs were in there. And he had a part in that. And that broke me. I said, I don't want that kind of money. Uh-uh. And so that's where the abuse started from, because I was against his lifestyle. I said, hey, you're a Christian, you know the Bible, you're not supposed to be doing these things, and you know that. Well, he just jumped up and started beating me. He beat me to where blood was dripping out of my face, bloody nose, blackened eyes, and stuff like that. So not only was I afraid of him, but I was also afraid because he told me they're going to follow you the rest of your life because of what I'm doing. And I was terrified, terrified. And so the abuse actually started there. I mean, it got worse, sure. I come home early from the hospital, and there's one of my neighbors in my lingerie with my husband, and I'm like, and then I know that if I say anything, he's going to jump on and beat me again. So I kept all that inside, trying to figure out how in the world I'm going to get out of that. Before I knew about the lieutenant in Vietnam, a lieutenant showed up to our apartment and said he had a letter saying it was from the American Red Cross, that my mother had a stroke in Columbus, Ohio. And I said, oh, my goodness. And I saw the Red Cross heading, so I figured he was telling the truth, right? And so he said, well, you got to pack and hurry up out of here. We have a C5 in the hangar waiting for you. And I said, but I have to contact, oh, your husband already knows. Oh, but we're going to take your kid and take him to your husband. But I said, no. The backstory to that is, when I was a little girl, maybe about 2 years old, my mother followed my father to his girlfriend's house in anger. In the summertime, of course, we didn't have air conditioning back then, with the window rolled down, lit dynamite and tossed it in his car. Not only did she blow up his car, but a part of the house went too. And so I ended up in a foster care. I mean, what you call it? No, an orphanage. For, I don't know, maybe a year or something like that. So I said, oh, no. That memory came back to me. I said, no. You can't take my kid. So I called my neighbor upstairs, and she quickly came down and got him. And so I went in a C5, which is like having two hammocks. A very big, long hammock on this side, and across from me, a big, long hammock. And they said, well, this aircraft just came back from Morocco, and we need a 18-hour crew rest in the Azores, which is a little island in the in the Atlantic Ocean. So I said, okay. But, I was pregnant with my daughter. So they said, well, before I even came down the stairs of the aircraft, they told me, well, they don't have any space in the maternity ward, but we do have some place where you can stay overnight, no problem. Well, it was the mental ward. And how I thought about that, well, most people a little off and they haven't been diagnosed yet, so no problem. And so I spent overnight, but before I went to bed, everybody watched Planet of the Apes. Oh, wow, Planet of the Apes, fantastic. Had dinner, went to bed, woke up the next morning trying to go, and I was stopped. And I said, oh, no, I'm not here. I'm just here for a crew rest. And they didn't want to take my word for it, and I didn't understand what and I tried to explain it, and it didn't work. And so they put me in a straitjacket, tied me in a straitjacket, set me down in a chair, and gave me a shot of, I don't know what it was, but I fell asleep because I wanted to leave. I was ready. Look, I'm gone. And no, they stopped me and put me in a straitjacket and put me down. And that, whatever that was, it put me to sleep. When I woke up, I was on a twin-size mattress looking around the room, but there was only a little window on the door, maybe 12 by 6 or 7 or something like that, with people looking in on me. So I said, something wrong here. This is not normal. And anyway, they were just trying to build a case. So when I came back to the States, that I would not, they would just say, well, she's got a record of being a little off, But anyway, I did get to my mother's home. I had to go through Walter Reed Army Hospital, stay another 2 weeks, mental ward, and then finally get to my mother's house. They said, you only have 10 days. I got back in 9 because I figured something was wrong. When I went to the door, nothing was wrong with my mom at all. I didn't say nothing. I said, I'm in a trap. And so I just enjoyed my mother, went back. And that's it. But those are the type of abuses that they were following me, and so that fear, and with him being what just terrified me. I felt like a hamster in an invisible cage. In that wheel, I would be spinning around, just fearless. I felt hopeless. I felt worthless, because anything I did, I was walking around on eggshells. I would get punished for it. And I had to deal with that. But 4 years of that gaslighting and bullying and things like that got me into the spot to where I felt worthless, hopeless. There was no way out. And so finally we ended up back in the United States. And I wanted to get away from him. And I said, I'm going to go to work. And I didn't work the whole time I was in Spain. Go to work and, make some money to save up to get away. But I would still be beaten. I didn't need to have a reason for it. Just he liked to see me cry. And so I would quit my jobs because I was ashamed to show up at work with bruises in my face. I was ashamed to let anybody know that I was being abused. And so back then, especially, your parents would say, what goes in the house stays in the house. So you don't want to, tell anybody what's going on. So I had to kind of keep it a secret. But by the time my daughter was like 3 years old and my son was 8, it was time to leave. And so I did gather up enough money to move into a townhome. And the day before we were supposed to move in, I went to the townhome, and I remembered I had the hiccups, and I was going to the kitchen to get some water. And I thought I was in there by myself. I wasn't in there by myself. Someone had broken into the back door. And probably the way you walk into this townhouse, you could actually circle the stairway. I could go living room, dining room, kitchen, and back around. Okay? And so that person had to be mirroring my steps, because all of a sudden, for some reason I thought the ceiling fell, but no, there was this big tall guy standing over me with a hammer, and the hammer I left on the kitchen counter, and he was welling me in the head with this camera, and I've never seen this person before, and so I threw my hands over top of my head so it wouldn't bust my brains out. So that's how I received 128 broken bones between my two hands. Both my wrists was broken. My arm was broken. I was paralyzed on my right side, and I had to have a plate put in my head. Okay, and so I found out from the police later that whoever lived there before me, that person was after them. But it was like December the 18th. I'll never forget the date. And so it was snow all over the place. But I was able to get away. And I knew when I was being attacked, and I knew as a young person that if I die, I'm going to die with a smile on my face. That's all there was to it. I'm going to leave here with a smile on my face because I'll be going home. Okay? So I looked at him in the face and I smiled. And I did not scream. That's a waste of energy. I did not scream. I tried to cover my head. I didn't scream. I just looked him dead in the eye. And I said, you can't kill me. You can't take my life because I'm the mother of civilization. That scared the daylights out of him. He took off running. And so all I did was make it to the back door, opened up the door. I think it had 3 or 4 steps, but it was covered with snow, like December the 18th in Ohio, snow covered. And I kind of slipped down the back stairs, and there was just a trail of blood all over the place, but I crawled to the fence, was one of those fence with the little triangle metal, those little triangle designs, and I put my hands in there, my bloody hands in those fence to pull myself up. And then I went to it was a townhouse, so I went to the apartment next door in the back and banged on the door. The lady raised her shade and she put it down. Well, I'm scared daylights out of me. And then I said, no, I got to live. I have 2 kids to take care of. And I was praying all the time, said, Lord, let me live to see my son at least turn 18 so he get a job and help take care of my daughter. I went to the next apartment and the guy let me in and I sat down, and they called the ambulance and all that good stuff. And I had to go to the hospital, all the surgery or whatever. So I had lost memory for a while. I didn't even know that I had went to school. I was about ready to graduate. I didn't know. But I did. Well, of course, it was all in the news, and I did end up getting a honorary associate's degree from Barter College in Columbus, Ohio, but I couldn't remember anything. I remembered my kids. I just couldn't remember. I remembered what happened, but I had no nightmares about it. The only nightmares I had was my husband beat me. I never dreamed about this other guy that attacked me and did all these other things. And then that's when I said, you know what? I can't let this bother me. I got 2 kids to raise. So I have something that I use that I call the orange effect. Now, this is personal, an orange effect. I know in the Bible says, whatever's good, whatever's pure, think about those things. So I decided, and I love oranges and tangerines, so I decided to focus on this orange. And when I focused on this orange so hard, I could see the texture and I could see the navel, and I visually split it in half and watch it fall from side to side. I got to the point where I could actually smell the aroma because I was focused on something totally good that I liked. And guess what? I could not think about what happened to me negatively when I'm focused on this other thing. So whatever's good, that worked for me. It happened. And I've used that through my life. Even this year, I use that all through my life. And so anyway, that's the end of that part of the testimony. Because I went through this ordeal in the hospital, I didn't know so many different services was open up to me. The social services in the hospital informed me that I could get on something called Section 8 and I had to get on welfare, and I never wanted to be on welfare because my mother always talked bad about folks in welfare or in the hood. So I'm like, no. But then that's what it's for. It's for people that really need help, not people that are just lazy and don't want to work and want to lay around. I don't know. So I was on welfare for a whole year. Because I couldn't work. I had both my arms in a cast, my head bandaged. What can I do? What can I do? Wrong thinking, because there was something that I can do. I had to move in with my mother, and she lived near a real estate company in which one of my friends from school's uncle owned. And so I saw a help sign on his building, and so I had the nerve with both hands in the cast of the cane and my head bandaged to go over there and say, well, hi, I'm Nezzie, you remember me? He said, yeah, oh my goodness, I heard about what happened. Yeah. I said, I saw you sign, I'd like to take the job. And he just looked at me. He said, really? I said, yeah, I could answer the telephone, watch this. I would take the receiver, up my hand and say, good morning, this is Craig Real Estate Company, how may I help you today? And he said, well, I'll tell you what, when you get your cast off of your arms, then I'll let you come in for a few hours and work for me, okay? I said, okay. So what I did, I went home, got the saw, start cutting, cast off. I went back the next day. Look, my casts are off. He just looked at me and shook my head. And there's nothing wrong with me mentally. We're responsible for our own happiness and our own sorrow. And I'd rather be happy any day than be depressed and sorrow. I don't like depression. And I try to keep myself from being depressed. But anyway, so I got the job, and Craig Real Estate, yeah, I did, 2 hours a day, and he would always buy my lunch, and I would go home. And then one day I went, he left me with the keys. And I came back, and I didn't listen to news. I still don't listen to news today. But anyway, I went back in the building. I was across the street, and the building looked really dark. The place had blown up. And I felt responsible because he left me with the keys, and the place blew up. Oh, Lord. And so I was standing in front of the building, and it started raining, but I didn't care, and I started crying. And then somebody touched me on the side. It was my son. His school was just a block away, and he handed me his umbrella. He said, here, Mommy, have this. And so I just stood there right with oh, that's so sweet of you. And I just stood there and cried. But some of his friends from the real estate that were Mammoth Life Insurance Company came by, too, and saw me standing there. I said, I don't have a job no more. And they said, well, you come work with us. And I said, okay. That type of thing. But it was my faith in the Most High that kept me going all this time. It's not that I'm tough or anything like that. It's just I believe that what was taught to me in church. That's simple. I took it literally. And so anyway, I saw him one day out, and he was like a relative. oh, I know you, relative. And anyhow, I started inviting them to come over to see the kids, and they did. And they said, Daddy, you know. And first off, when I walked in with them, the kids were staring down the register on the floor, and I said, I don't know what they're doing. So he stood right there. They didn't even know that their dad had showed up. And we found out that the hamster went down the thing, well, anyway. And so he came back and he said, well, I was looking for a home. And I said, Daddy, oh, well, you already have a home. All you have to do is get in it. I think I was crazy then. All you have to do is get in it. But I had lost my memory. I still can't recall some years. I can't recall them, no matter what. But anyhow, it went on. Things were fine for a while, and then things got out of hand. By this time, my daughter, we moved around a lot. Way too much. And then my son finally got his language together, because when he came back from Spain, he spoke a mixture of Spanish and English together. And he finally got that all straightened out. He's totally English now. Well, English and Hebrew, okay. But anyway, so we moved around way too much, because I never wanted the kids to come home from school and see the furniture outside the door, because we had been evicted. So that was the reason we moved so much. And then I started getting beat up all over again. But the last straw was, my daughter was 15, I think, 15 years old, just turned 15. And one day I had pneumonia, and I was laying on the sofa. I didn't even know he was home, but she went into our bedroom and heard something in the closet. And he was in there curled up in the fetal position, and she asked what was wrong, and he told her about the drugs and stuff like that. It was too much, and she was saying, Dad, you should never do that. You should never touch drugs, blah, blah, blah. Anyhow, he threatened to kill her. When I heard that, the first thought I had would be over my dead body. So when she ran towards me, I jumped him, give her a chance to get out the door, and I jumped him. But he slung me. I was full of medication because I had pneumonia. He slung me so hard that I probably about 6 to 8 feet landed on the edge of the counter with my chin, busted my chin, fractured my skull, and I went straight back. She dashed downstairs. We were in a townhome, but she dashed downstairs to get neighbors. They immediately ran up the stairs and to stop him. The ambulance came, took him away. But I had to go into the hospital, and we really didn't have a lot of family. But I was in the hospital. I was suffering, and she told me she was going to be with a friend of hers. And then the next thing I knew, I had to go into a battered women's shelter, and she came in there for a moment, but she left out, and she ended up in Georgia and eventually into sex trafficking. So that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And even though I never went back, like so many women, they will go back. I never went back after that. I said, no, I'm going to make it anyhow. And so my daughter called me from Atlanta. I still didn't know what she was doing, called me from Atlanta. And I told her, I said, well, as soon as I heal enough to travel, I'll come. And she had gotten this apartment, still not knowing what she was doing, because I didn't know. She was the type of person that get opportunities out of nowhere at a young age. I mean, she was writing for a newspaper at age 14. She was the city hall, city council, all kind of stuff. So that's why my son and I called her every 2 weeks, because every 2 weeks, I'm telling you, every 2 weeks. Was something. So, but even though I was out of that invisible cage, running around in fear like a scared hamster, a hamster can be taken out of that cage and put into a ball that is clear and round, and in that ball, it could run anywhere it wants to go. That was my life. New York, Chicago, LA. I've been to every state in the United States except for Alaska and Maine. Not the fear of my husband, but the fear of the drug cartels. But I finally said, no, this has got to stop. I'm going to go and get help. And I did. And I found out that I could have my name changed, my birth certificate changed, my social security changed. And then when I get my apartment and all my utilities, then all I have to do is have it all sent to the State Department, and then once a week they'll send me a manila envelope with all my mail in it. So that's how I have to hide and protect myself. And I was 32 years old when I was attacked, and now I'll be 78 in a few weeks. Like I say, my age is my wisdom. My testimony, my age is my wisdom, but my testimony, my disability, and I have many, is my my disability is my testimony, because through all that, I can still smile. I may not be able, I'm sitting here, you can't see my disability, but my knees don't bend. And from my navel down, I've had 13 surgeries. Even though all my hands, 128 bones are broken, both of my wrists are broken, paralyzed in one side of my body, even though I had brain surgery, I can still smile. I can still smile, and I still have hopes and dreams. And I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet, because even though this year was rough, I mean, come on, those three key C's, the cancer, the COVID, the cash taken from Social Security, thinking I'm still in a nursing home, and then the car crash. But I get cash from the car crash. And to get me all through those C's, Christ did it. Yeah, the love of Christ did it. And so, I am looking forward. I'm still in physical therapy, but I'm looking forward to, let me tell you. Also, my financial situation at this time is only the rich soil in which my seeds of hope were planted. But out of that comes my purpose in life, my purpose-driven life. I come from 6 generations of seamstress, so it's kind of automatic, and I just love interior decorating. But through all of that, God can still use me, and I can't think of a better way to spend the remainder of my life than serving other women. So I have been invited to come to Nairobi, Kenya, to teach women coming out of sex trafficking, coming out of whatever type of trauma they came out of. I get to love on them. I get to help them. I could teach them how to sew their way out of poverty, one creative stitch at a time. And I'm looking forward to that. And I might have trouble right now, but hey, look, I've been in a wheelchair for 3 years. I got out of the wheelchair, then I was in a walker for 2 years, and then I was in the cane, and then the car crash took me back to the walker. But I'm in the cane today, okay? And so, I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to that. And so, like I say, in my future, if y'all ever want to look me up, I'll give you my final address now. It's 1000 Pearly Gates Boulevard, north of the throne room in glorious heaven. Yahushua HaMashiach.